All right. It looks like we're about 2 minutes in, which is kind of where I wanted to start. So I'll get started here. Again, I'm Sam from Mastermark. Welcome, everyone. This is Mastering Airport Wildlife Management from Compliance to Capability, one of our webinars here for our Mastermark webinar series. Again, it looks like I'm seeing some familiar faces, so welcome back, and some new ones as well. So welcome. I can get started here with just a quick kind of introduction to Mastermark. So if you're unaware, Mastermark, who Mastermark is, we are a wildlife hazard management company based in Singapore and Changi Airport Group's principal wildlife consultant. So we work across the region with offices here in Singapore, in Malaysia, and in the Philippines. And a key factor about kind of what makes Mastermark is that we look through the lens of wildlife hazard management through maybe 3 different perspectives. So one of those is going to be with the biologists from a science-based perspective, also from maybe the managerial or policy side. And then we also like to take a look at the ground operation and what's going on the ground and kind of marrying those 3 together. So that's more or less the Mastermark approach, but we'll get a little bit into that a little bit later, but we're more focused on today's speakers. So that's going to be myself. I'll be moderating this session. So I'm a Mastermark wildlife ecologist working here in Singapore. I know I've said hello to some of you in the previous years. Some of you are very familiar with me. If not, hello. And then also that leads me to our 2 very special guest speakers. First, we have Ash McAlpine joining us from Australia. So it's a little bit later in his day today. I think it's closer to the end of the day, so he'll be rushing to get some dinner after this. But Ash has been actively engaged in aviation for over 35 years. In diverse fields from ATC to airport management and also safety management as well. He has aviation regulatory experience for over 11 years, and he is the founder and director of an independent aviation consultancy company called Avios Australis. Did I say it right, Ash? You're muted.
Yep, you got it right, Sam. Thanks.
Perfect. I was practicing. It's a very fancy name. I wanted to make sure that I got it right. Ash is also an advisor for several international CAA groups, so one within Asia Pacific and globally, as well as being the chair for the Australian Aviation Wildlife Hazard Group, which is actually happening shortly. Also, someone that we have that I work very close with is Mr. Christopher Wee. So Chris is actually the managing director of Mastermark, based here in Singapore with me. He has over 20 years of specialized experience in aerodrome wildlife safety, as well as managing Mastermark. So he's a very busy guy. So we're very, very lucky to have both of them join us today. And basically how this is going to work for today's agenda is that we're going to have 3 different sessions. And what it's going to be more of a Q&A session. So for session 1, it's going to be the role and challenges of a regulator. I'm going to kind of hand it off to Ash and Chris. I have some questions prepared and they're going to answer them. If you have questions for them as we go on, you can actually type that in the Q&A portion at the top of the screen. So yeah, any questions that you may think of, feel free to type in, and then we can go over that in that last section, that Q&A at the bottom there. So we have 3 20-minute sessions, and then we'll kind of open up the floor to your questions as well. All right, so session 1, I really wanted to talk about the roles and the challenges of the regulator. Just talking a little bit about this topic, we'll kind of be going through all of these topics in the lens of iceberg. It's very Titanic today, but before we bring on the questions for Chris and Ash, I just wanted to kind of set up the problem statement here. So when most people think about aviation regulators. They may picture, audits, checklists, wildlife hazard managed plans, compliance, all that kind of stuff. But compliance is the part that everyone can see, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. So underneath that waterline is where the regulators are juggling a lot more. So what are they wiggling? They're maybe weighing safety risk assessments, and maybe they're talking with airlines, airport operators. They're maybe talking with local communities, environmental bodies who don't always see eye to eye with what they're, what other people are dealing with. So that can be dealing with, wildlife strikes still happening, fast changing wildlife behavior, different standards and different stakeholders as well. So that's kind of where the problem arises, and that's where I want to kind of dig in more with Chris and Ash. So the hot seat. I'll ask my first question to Ash. Where does the friction between the regulator and the operators actually start?
Yeah, nice, nice opening question in the opening piece, Sam. It's an interesting one, and clearly cultures around the world are different, as are regulators around the world. But I think the most common thing I see replicated everywhere is you hear the different voices. So you hear industry say, "I just want to be told what I have to do," and likewise, the regulators of the world are moving increasingly away from prescriptive compliance towards an outcome or performance-based model. So they're moving towards this is what we want you to achieve, not how to do it. But you still have a lot of people in industry, because they're very focused on those top lines you showed on your iceberg of passing the audit, saying, just tell me what I have to do. And in itself, I guess it comes really down to sharing a common understanding between the two entities that come together, the regulator and industry. Ultimately, industry needs to, and whether that's an airline, an airport, whether they're an ATC provider, an engineering facility, you need to actually own the outcome, just like you own the outcomes of your business in the rest of it. And safety is one of those. And likewise, the regulator, if they wade into telling industry how to do it, they actually become complicit in the outcome. And so they lose their unbiased opinion, which is what you want a regulator to do. So I think that's the biggest conflict or friction I see is people expecting the regulator's perspective and industry's perspective to be exactly the same. Their vision should be similar. They should be looking to the same point on the horizon, but where they're looking from is different.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Chris, anything to add on that?
Yeah, thanks, Ash. Yeah, definitely, that would be the key, basically the key component of this regulator and airport operator relationship. However, that also, to add on to what Ash was saying again, insofar as friction is concerned, I think that we also have to be mindful of again, Mastermark being a regional company, we see a variety of airport groups, a variety of regulators as well. And different regulators have different relationships with the airport operators as well. Some of them adopt a very top-down approach. We are the regulator, you have to comply with us, everything we say. And some of them have a more a good casual relationship. I wouldn't say casual relationship, but they have a very good relationship where they have a very open relationship. They can communicate well, they can talk well, and the airport operator is not afraid of the regulator. It's more of a partnership rather than a very strict hierarchy where you have to follow. So again, I would say that sometimes airport operators tend to get very worried about certain kinds of regulators that are very top-down, very very top-down approach. So again, I think that Ash would agree with me that a more collaborative approach has always been beneficial for any state, whether or not it's a big country or it's a small country. The objective is the same. They're all trying to work towards the same direction of aviation safety. So again, I tend to think that the friction from a regulator that's very top down in an environment where there's a lot of fear tends to be a bit counterproductive.
Yeah, spot on. I think you're talking there, Chris, about in another language, a positive safety culture, and I think at times too people tend to just think about industry and say you need to have a positive safety culture. Well, so does the regulator. The regulator needs to be open-minded and be listening, probably a little bit more than they're talking. And we do see at times regulators talk more than they listen. So yeah, good one.
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Chris, while I have you, I'll give you question 2. Where do regulatory frameworks lag behind the latest wildlife management science, or the latest data, or all that kind of stuff? And how do you close that gap?
Okay, so I guess again, it's going to always be it's not just your WHMP. For those of you who may not be familiar, what WHMP is your Wildlife Hazard Management Plan, which is basically every certified airport is supposed to have one. And the Wildlife Hazard Management Plan is basically the plan that you use. Usually it's done in collaboration with the consultant, the biologist, and you come up with that, so to speak, action plan that this is what we're going to be doing in our airport to be able to mitigate and resolve all these wildlife conflicts that we have. Now, the framework is actually above that. That means the framework looks at the WHMP as a subset, and there are a lot of other components of that. That means your ops. It could even be the advisory circulars that the regulator has that goes above and beyond the Wildlife Hazard Management Plan. So when we look at the framework is not quite keeping up with the latest wildlife management science, it's because these regulatory frameworks were set up or maybe reviewed much less often than you get your biologist reports coming up to the airport. So generally, the regulatory framework within a state or a country is usually relatively broad. It doesn't really go into the nitty-gritties of what an individual airport might have issues with. So the objective is a very big picture that the systems in your airport, the method, again, Ash, correct me if I'm wrong, but the methodologies with which you're adopting, the direction with which the airport or the airport group is headed towards is in the right direction. That's what the regulatory framework is supposed to check on, audit on. Okay. Wildlife management science, as we've seen in the past 3, 5, maybe even 7 years, has been moving very quickly. The way they do things, the onset of new technologies that are available, the way we look at wildlife, the conservation front, the wildlife welfare front, have all been things that have been affecting the way an airport looks at their wildlife hazard management plan. So again, the regulatory framework, because it doesn't get updated all too often, especially the large white paper policy documents, tend to be a little bit behind, and therefore, I would say that in a way it would be easier to comply because the airport is more up to date, and some of these regulatory policy directions would, again, that's going to another topic later about whether or not compliance equates to I'm complying, therefore I'm good. Not necessarily. Yeah.
Sure. And Ash?
Yeah, and thanks for that, Chris. You've given me a really nice place to step off there. It's an interesting one, and we did say about regulatory frameworks lagging was part of the question. Well, let's think of the opposite. Let's think of a place where if the regulatory framework can change faster and in front of what anyone in industry can, and that's a place we don't want to be. Remember, we're in a global system, and the global system and the regulations and the things that cascade out of it come down out of ICAO. And people often complain that ICAO takes 7 or 9 years to change an annex. Well, they take 7 or 9 years because as they're proposing a change, they need to circulate that to the world and get all the state entities to think about what that could mean to them, to talk to their industry, to consider their regulatory changes. Then ICAO changes their standard, gives a couple of years warning to the world for it to be effective, and that allows states, large or small, simple or complex, to change their regulatory framework, giving industry enough time and advance warning to adapt to it. That's the way our aviation system is built. And when you understand that, that's actually a good situation. If suddenly a particular state or a particular area could change a rule tomorrow that would, like if we, I don't know, tomorrow we suddenly said for all of Asia Pacific, we're all going to fly at different levels tomorrow. That would turn the world upside down because we've got to change aircraft software, we've got to change air traffic control systems. We need to be able to do that. It gets back to where I said in the first one though, if the regulatory framework is an outcomes-based one, then it does lag the technology, but it doesn't stifle innovation. It actually allows people to be innovative and that keeps them in front. And that's where very, very good providers of advice or service or consultancy, airports, airlines, other organizations, when they're thinking that innovative side of things, they will therefore always be in front of the regulation. So it actually doesn't matter that the regulation is lagging behind, because the regulation also, we need to remember, is the absolute minimum you should be doing. It's not what you can be doing or what is good for your business. So anybody who's looking at, I'm a motorbike rider, and one of the things when I learned to ride a motorbike is they say when you see a hazard, do not look at it. When you see a pothole in the road, don't look at it because you'll hit it. People that concentrate on looking at the rules all the time because they're worried about the regulator, they will go so close to the rules that they'll probably hit it, the edge one day. Whereas if you look past it, if you look at where you want to go, if you look at the outcome you want to achieve, you'll actually always maintain a nice buffer from the regulations and you'll enjoy the outcome as a result.
I like that metaphor.
Thank you.
Just a quick reminder, this is great, some really good stuff. If you guys have any questions, feel free to use that Q&A portion, and you can ask there, and then we can discuss that after the course. So if you have any questions for Chris or Ash, do feel free to use that Q&A function. It should be at the top of your screen. Our last question for this section on basically everything regulators, I'll give to the regulator. So this is for you, Ash. What's the biggest misconception that airports have about regulators? What regulators are actually looking for? So basically, yeah, your biggest misconceptions about regulatory work, Mayo.
Yeah. Biggest is a hard one, but there's a few things that immediately come to mind. You often, and in fact, doesn't matter if it's an airport or an airline, you'll often see that mad rush at the last minute. The regulator's going to come along. We want all of our publications, all of our plans, all of our documents reissued and re-signed. Why? If it's what you've been doing for the last 12 months, that's fine. What the regulator actually wants to see is very close to, there's a guy from out of the US system, helped found the Flight Safety Foundation, a guy called William or Bill Voss. And he said, good safety management is only about three things. It's about knowing your hazards and how they can become risks, doing something about it, and understanding, are those things working? So when you think of it from the regulator's point of view, they want to understand that the airport actually understands their hazards and how it can become risks, i.e. we understand the wildlife situation, not just that wildlife are a hazard. Which wildlife, when, how do they come in? Which ones are more critical? Which ones are less critical? How can they become a risk? Is it 12 months of the year? Is it only at night time? Is it only at dusk and dawn? Is it when the monsoon's coming in? Things like that. And then the things you put in place, and Chris mentioned about the plan before, I think of WHMP actually as a program. It's a whole system, like a safety management system. But you're doing things to prevent those wildlife coming there in the first place, but you're also prepared to do things if they do come. You know, this is the harassment and the scaring and things like that. But it's not just those activities. There's the communication element, communicating to your stakeholders preventatively and reactively. There's the gathering of the data, the analyzing. If a regulator sees that you understand the hazard, you're putting things in place, and you know when those things are working, the regulator will walk away with a big smile on their face. But what they see instead is people worrying about a date on a piece of paper and whether the paper has got folds in the corner of it. We're digital these days, but they're worried like that. Stop looking backwards at the regulator. Look forwards towards the outcome you want, and the regulator will be happy. Should be happy.
I was going to say, do you speak for all regulators, or are you just a
No.
nice one?
No, I can't even speak for any anymore. I'm no longer in that game, but I
Sure.
do provide training to regulators around the world as well.
Okay. Chris, do you have any opinions as a non-regulator?
Yeah, again, it's just what I observe, and again, just want to go back to the first question that we were talking about. Part of the reason why, and Mastermark looks at culture every time we deal with CAA or airport operator. We look at the culture within the organization to see whether or not people are too busy trying to impress the auditors or their bosses. And that's not being true to the real mission that we have. The real mission is what Ash mentioned. We're trying to make sure that, or should I say, the regulator is trying to make sure that the airport is on top of it. They know what they're doing. They've diagnosed the situation very well, and they have a very good plan in place. And don't try to impress me, because that's not the point. The point is to make sure that everybody is on top of their jobs. They've identified the hazards and they want to mitigate the risks, so that, and again, a good plan moving forward. You don't have to defend that. That stands on its own 2 feet. Yeah.
Perfect. With that, that takes us to our second session. If you have any more regulatory questions, again, feel free to use that Q&A portion. It should be at the top of your screen. We can kind of go over that at the end of the session, but we'll kind of transform over to session 2, which is a systemic approach to wildlife hazard management. So here, the main point with this slide is that a wildlife plan is only the starting point, or a wildlife hazard management plan that both Chris and Ash were talking about. That's not your end goal per se. That should be kind of where your program starts. So we have our iceberg again, as we did with the regulatory, and at the top of the iceberg is, we have that you're ICAO compliant, you have the plan completed, you have maybe a manual approved, but maybe your audit's ready, but again, there's more beneath the surface. So, when it comes to the plan, a plan might be a document, but we're looking at maybe more of a system. So a system is everything that has to work together to make that document mean something. So that can be the habitat around the runway, that can be maybe the seasonal migration patterns moving through, maybe the species that are actually present, the airport's own layout, traffic patterns, the local community, and land nearby. All of these things that should be continually looked into and also implemented within your program or plan. So we want to make sure it's no one size fits all. Every airport should have its own kind of customized, tailored plan or program. So again, underneath that watermark would be, local species, that behave differently, maybe different habitats, all of that kind of stuff. And with that, I will hand over to Chris and Ash here. We have some questions prepared for you. The first one is, what does a tailored wildlife hazard management plan look like? And how do you justify kind of building one from scratch and maybe not adapting a different one? Why do we have to do all the hard work in making it very tailored? And that can be either of you. Whoever
Okay,
gets
let me just
first.
start with this one.
Sure.
Okay, and again, um, assuming let's consider a fictitious country A, all right? And country A has got 3 airports. And country A has got 1 large international airport, it's got 1 domestic airport, and it's got 1 small general aviation airport. Now, all the different planes that come to these airports are usually going to be of different sizes. They're going to be different masses. Some of them are very heavy, some of them are very light. Some of them have jet engines, some of them have got turboprop, some of them are piston engines. And a one size obviously wouldn't fit all for all 3 airports. So again, sometimes some exposure we've had in the past is that we see a airport group get a consultant or their own wildlife people to come up with a wildlife hazard management plan. And I guess maybe they're not so familiar with the differences in terms of one airport to another airport, but they apply it as a one size fits all. They take the WHMP and apply it across all 3 airports, and they tell the airport managers, look, this is your wildlife hazard management plan, follow it. And it's somewhat broad because it's supposed to be able to accommodate all 3 different types of airports. But it's a blunt tool. It's a knife that doesn't cut. It doesn't cut nicely because it's not bespoke. It's not specific to that particular runway. So again, as we know, if you're flying a large 747, for example, certain birds, again, let me just caveat, from a safety point of view, aren't going to be that big a problem to you if you're a very large jet airliner. Okay, now it doesn't mean that the bird strike is not important. Of course, every bird strike is taken very seriously, but from a safety point of view, a small Swift is very unlikely to can bring down a 4-engine 747. Now, that small Swift might be a very big problem for a Cessna. That small Swift might be a very very significant problem to a single-seat piston aircraft. So, as the airport operator who's running that particular airport, you do have to go and see where the different species fall into a risk category, and that is specific to that particular airport. Now, again, if we look at a wildlife hazard management plan, which is, as what Ash mentioned, it's not just a document, it's actually an entire program. It also relates to the resources that the airport has at its disposal. Usually bigger airports have got more resources, smaller airports have got less resources. So again, depending on what you're looking at, it has to, for it to be a sharp knife in the drawer, it does have to be a very tailored approach to what kind of birds this airport has and so on and so forth. I'm sure a lot of the participants we have today already know this, but I think it's a very important thing for us to just re-emphasize that sometimes taking a standard template and applying it across all the member airports of that particular airport group sometimes is very, very counterproductive. Yep.
Do you want me to fly straight on, Sam? Sam's on mute. I've got one on him now.
Sam.
It was
okay.
because in Singapore, we had a big plane just fly by, so I had to mute my screen. Speaking of airports, but yeah, fly straight on.
Okay, thanks. It's and I'll probably end up echoing a lot of what Chris said then, just then here, but I'll put it in a slightly different way for you. When you think about what a wildlife hazard management program is, it is simply hazard-specific risk management. So an airline will actually have a program embedded in their system of how they manage weather events, so turbulence, icing, monsoons, typhoons, different things they encounter, snow and ice around the world. Depending on where they fly, they'll have plans on what they do with volcanic ash. Wildlife is just another hazard you come across in aviation. All of this is actually managed in mature operators within their safety management system. And there's that word, system. We're talking about systemic approach. It's just a management, an all-of-system approach of how to manage things. One of the tenets, one of the cornerstones that ICAO uses is that a safety management system should be scaled for the size, nature, and complexity and inherent risk of what you're facing. So this is what Chris was just saying. So you don't want, and there are some very large, very complicated, drowning in science wildlife hazard management plans around the place, which are probably fantastic documents. If they're for a very large, very complex airport with some very real and high risk situations, it's probably highly appropriate. But again, if you take them to a smaller, less complex, or as Chris even used with his analogy of a swift, if you try and apply that you've seen for one species at another airport without understanding how the hazard can become a risk, what it actually means. The number of regulators even that don't understand that a Robinson 22 or a Cessna 152 is not certified for bird impact at all. At all. There's not, people always quote this magic 3 kilograms or 5 kilograms. No, that's if it's certified. So understanding that. So I guess our plans, they should be exactly the same. Our plans, you should always be asking, are they scaled for the size, the nature, the complexity of the risk of what we're dealing with? Now, what that doesn't mean, though, is that doesn't mean if you're a smaller, less complex airport that you just forget about half of the things that are in the other ones. No, you still should look at the science behind it. What are those hazards? When are they there? How are they realized? What's the operations at the airport? What's the traffic mix at the airport? Things like that. But when it comes into the solutions, the controls that you put in to preventing and helping prevent escalation, that's where that tailoring is. So it's just a different way of thinking about it. But just like every airport, every airline, every person in an aviation system is unique, likewise, I think every wildlife hazard management program should be unique as well.
As while I have you, I might skip question 2 for now and take you right to question 3. I feel like it kind of leads to where you left off. What is one thing that would separate a leading airport from the rest then in your eyes?
Yeah. And staying with me, Sam, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it comes back to where I was a few minutes ago. It's not looking backwards at the regulator and worrying what the regulator thinks. It's looking at that leading data. It's looking at where you want to go. And I think it was Patrick Hudson, for those that have again done some studies in safety management, when Patrick Hudson is reasonably famous for the a culture diagram. It looks like a series of steps, and you can read the descriptions and see where you think an organization is from a safety culture point of view. We mentioned this before. A leading organization is at that proactive, tending towards a generative culture. They're always looking for what's the next thing that could happen? What is the data telling me? What is the thing I'm not looking for at the moment because I think it's okay? They're looking at other airports that are similar to them, going, what are they doing that maybe we could consider? What is the thing we've been doing for 10 years, but maybe is not working quite as well anymore because it's been there for 10 years. So they're always striving. Hudson used to talk about chronic unease. If you find a safety manager or a safety department in an aviation operator who has the right amount of unease, that they're always looking for those things that could catch them out, that's where you actually will generally see a high performance organization that is actually really starting to lead, as opposed to the reactive, which is the opposite of leading, the lagging one, who's always looking backwards, going, oh, the regulator's coming in 2 months, so I've got to update my plan and put a new cover sheet on it. It's like, how about you go out and spend some time on your airfield and do some stuff out there?
I guess I have a question here too, just kind of thinking of it. Does it have to be a very, big airport with a huge budget, or can you be a smaller airport with a more limited budget and still be a leading airport when it comes to this?
Absolutely, because it's all about culture, Sam. It's not about 10,000 moves doesn't make you a leading airport. That's just how you measure whether it's large or small. Just like you can have a high performance car that's very large or a high performance car that's very small. Aircraft are the same in an aviation system, exactly. I've probably seen some of the more mature and leading airports in the world, or organizations, sorry, I won't just say airports, are actually some of the smaller ones, because they also have the management agility. So when they see something coming, they can quickly maneuver to one side. Got to be very careful you don't become up and down. That can be disturbing for your workforce as well, because workforce likes to know where they're going. But likewise, if you think of the other way around, some of the very, very old school aviation operators in the world that have been around for 100 years, there is a lot of inertia there, and it takes a long time to change them out of the habits they've been doing. And if some of those habits aren't keeping up with where the modern innovative world is going, that means they're going to actually lag behind everybody else because they've got so much inertia. It takes a long time to turn that ship. So, yeah. So it's not about size, it's actually about culture.
Yeah, makes sense. I think we have one more question here. I'll give it to you, Chris. How do you get the biologists, the ops teams, the ground operations guys, the safety team, kind of all pulling in the same direction when they don't normally share a table, or maybe even an office? Or a lot of airports, they might not even talk at all. So how would you manage that, or how would you get them to talk?
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to cycle back just a little bit to the previous question. And again, I just want to reinforce what Ash said. It doesn't mean that if you're not a big international airport with, I don't know, 50 million passengers, it means that you're not going to be on that leading airports list. It really is, at least from my opinion, the one thing that really stands out is what Ash mentioned. It's that situational awareness. You know what's happening on your airport. You know what the problem is. You've diagnosed it correctly. You've got your wildlife people to give you an idea of where the wildlife is coming from, what kind of wildlife you have, so on and so forth. And then what you're gonna do about it. Now, that plan that you are going to be implementing shouldn't just stop at the next 12 months. It can be a 5-year plan, it can be a 6-year plan, it can be something that allows you to say, okay, look, we're going to change the species of grass from the whole airport starting from 2027, and this is going to take 6 years. It's going to take 8 years. But you're having a phased approach to maybe create a monoculture for your grass. Maybe you're going to be doing a bit more returfing, and all that can be phased in. But it starts from you being able to read the ground, be situationally very clear about what's happening on your runway, what the attractants are, and how do you slowly, even if you don't have the budget for it this year, maybe for the next 5 years, in the next 3 years, you can plan for that. But in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, when you look back, you say, wow, we've come this far. Rather than looking at it as a 12-month, and trying to fit everything within that budget of the 12 months, it can be a bit difficult because everything is so expensive. The scale of airports is so large that if you want to do even grass cutting is expensive. So if you break it down into pieces, it's a lot more palatable. So I think that one thing really is the situational awareness that Ash was talking about, to be able to make sure that you know what you're trying to do, you know your ground, you know the situation, and you're very clear about how you want to go about fixing that. Okay, going back to the question that you mentioned, Sam, we are in Mastermark, we are very adamant that the consultancy or the data collection side of it is just that 50% of the equation. The other 50% of the equation is the operations itself, which is to say that there's no point you having the best plan in the world if you don't have the means to implement it well. So I think that at least a few of us have seen some airports that have mountains of data and consultant reports from leading consultants around the world, and it's just sitting there on the shelf and it's not translating into anything on the ground. A brilliant professor or PhD has gone through your airport and given you a very good idea of what the situation is on your airport, at least from an ecological point of view. But how do you translate it to lower bird strikes, less damaging bird strikes, less AOGs, and so on and so forth? There's that gap. So we are always trying to push both the biologists or the ecologists, or if you want to call that the airport wildlife biologists, together with the airside operations or the wildlife operations. In some airports, it's actually pest control, to work on that same direction, to be having excellent communication between the two of them, and to be able to make sure that what is being recommended actually can be done. And for things that cannot be done, maybe they shouldn't be recommended in the first place. So again, there is a lot of disconnect when a consultant or biologist doesn't work with ops and start giving recommendations that are kind of like cut and paste from all the other airports that they also see, and then they have this one size fits all. They start applying very generic, very safe sounding recommendations. Oh, cut your grass. Oh, short grass policy. Oh, maybe you should do this, do that, do that. And you can see these same recommendations in 20 other airports, That is something which, if it is not beneficial for that particular airport, shouldn't be in the recommendations at all. And again, if the recommendations state very specifically in a very bespoke manner, in a very tailored fashion, that this is what your airport can do, given the resources that you have available, then that is a executable recommendation. And it should lead to some kind of feedback mechanism where you're seeing the results, whether or not you're getting the results that you expected, or you're not getting the results that you expected. So at the end of the day, the airport manager has to be brutally honest about the recommendations, the implementation, and what outcomes it brought about. And if there's anything that needs to be tweaked to be real to themselves, to be honest with themselves, to say that, okay, this didn't work, let's try that. And we serve some of the biggest airports in Southeast Asia, and I'll say that I wish that they got it right all the time, and they don't. Very often they get it wrong as well. And they have to be honest with themselves to say that, okay, this wasn't working, let's try something else. And again, going back to the culture of the airport, the management, they have to be understanding that this wildlife thing, this wildlife program, is not something that is like engineering where you get predictable outcomes all the time. It's nature. You're dealing with something that is very unpredictable. You're dealing with a very complex environment, and sometimes it's very hard for you to figure it out. Exactly what will happen if you do this thing or that thing. So again, consultants, biologists, working together with the operations team, getting the program right. Don't be too ambitious. Make sure you're able to be right-sized in the efforts that you're doing so that you can get that outcome that you want. Yeah.
Perfect. With that, I'm gonna head to our last section here,
Sure.
which will be session 3, and it actually kind of takes off for where Chris left off. So we're kind of talking about on the ground and kind of that ground operations team and what's actually happening and what's being implemented here. So we have our third iceberg. And basically, what's on the surface here, what we see is a lot of airports like the new shiniest tech, and tech is great, and tech is the future, and tech should be implemented. But that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg here. So, that could be a new radar system, maybe new AI cameras, equipment purchased, more sensors, all of that kind of thing. But all of these tools need people. They need people running them, people trained to use them. They need people to interpret that data, to adapt that data for behavioral shifts between different species. Maybe following through with the unglamorous groundwork of it all is kind of that belly of the iceberg for this. So that can be proper training, proper training on the technology, but also training on some of the more routine runway inspections and all that kind of stuff. So with that, I will head over to the questions for our final section. Again, if you have any questions, I believe we've got a few of them in the Q&A section, but feel free to type those as Chris, myself, Asher speaking, and then we can get to those by the end of the session as well. So I believe we have some questions already, but we welcome any more. The first one here is, what is the most overrated and underrated wildlife management technology? It's a very controversial question, but I'll let either of you take that first.
Can I go first, Chris? And I'll be super quick, and then I'll hand over to you because you're probably much more an expert here than I. The most underrated one I see around the place globally, doesn't matter whether you're on an island, a continent, a desert, at the coast, is people. And I know it'd be controversial to actually call people technology. Um, Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But I see this quest, as Sam mentioned, to buy the shiny, the new, the sexy, the amazing bit of equipment. And you look at what they've invested in the people understanding what they that we want them to do, to report, to observe, to how to act, how to communicate. That's the thing that I see as the most underrated. I'll leave it at that. I'll head over quickly to Chris because I know we're mindful of time and we do want to get to those questions. But over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Ash. Okay, so I'm not going to specifically name a certain technology. I think that it's also a mindset that somehow if we spend $500,000 on a particular set of tech, that creates $500,000 worth of expectations. And if I spend $5,000 on a sound system, maybe a loud hailer or something like that, that creates $5,000 worth of expectation. Now, the trap is that management starts expecting you to create miracles when they buy you, when they procure very expensive pieces of equipment. And sometimes it is very stressful for the people on the ops, the ground level ops guys who now have an unfair expectation from the management of saying, okay, we bought, let's say we bought an avian radar, and an avian radar is a data collection tool. It does no mitigation whatsoever. But they say that, hey, we've spent $1 million or $500,000 on a radar. How come our bird strikes are going up? So again, I think that it's very important for us to be able to understand that the value of the system is not the dollar value attached to it. The value of the system is the purpose with which it was employed. There aren't that many cheap radars around. So if you want to have a radar, it is going to cost this amount, but that doesn't make up your program. It is a component of the program. It has to be integrated with the other components of the program. And if it's outsized, then you're going to have a lopsided program where you expect one product to be the miracle cure and the rest of them are not so important because they're cheap, you know. Now, what Ash mentioned is true. At the end of the day, whether or not you're talking about automated systems, which are not fully automated, by the way, you still need a person behind. Whether or not you're getting the dispersal team to go and disperse the birds, whether or not you're analyzing the data, today you still need a person at the back of the computer churning out the numbers, and that person is the person who you really have to appreciate because that person makes the magic happen. If the tech stands alone by itself, nothing much happens, even for automated systems. So in Singapore, we have a lot of automation in our airports, but it's the people behind that make that magic happen.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's always very important for management to be very cognizant that the attention, it's very easy to take somebody who's been working in your airport for 10 years for granted, get complacent about it, and oh, that's your job anyway. And again, people still need to be treated as though they're part of, people still have, people want to be recognized, I guess. And they want to, just because they've been doing a good job well for 9 or 10 years doesn't mean that they don't deserve a pat on the back. And again, that's I'll argue that, I mean, not say argue, but I'll support that person is actually the most important piece of tech. So I agree with Ash 100%.
And that's coming from someone who loves tech. Chris always has the newest gadgets in the office. So very good, cool. All right, question 2 here. We have how do you fix chronic underreporting of wildlife strikes from or near misses from your ground team? Maybe that's your firefighters. Some airports have their own ground operations team when it comes to wildlife. Ash, I'll let you have this question first.
Yeah, and I will be quick. This one's fairly easy, at least for me, Sam. It's all again culture. you need to understand why things are happening. Just like in a wildlife hazard management program, why we're seeing these strikes. If you're getting underreporting, and notice the words here, underreporting of strikes and near misses. So underreporting of the bad things, have a look at why. Speak to the people, try and understand. It's nearly always, I think, would be underpinned with some degree of fear, some degree of I'm going to get in trouble, we're going to not get our bonuses, or the managers won't be happy, so we just won't report it. There's ways out of it. It's easy to say I've got a cultural problem. The hard thing is to start doing something about it, and it does take time. Instead of just going for that, just going for the final solution, bring it back a section. Actually look at people and probably incentivize or reward hazard reporting. So this is the proactive reporting. Don't wait for something to hit an aircraft. Don't wait for a near miss to happen. Hey, we want you to put in reports when you see wildlife around on the airfield, even if they're not near an aircraft. Start rewarding that positive behavior. And you can think of this as any sort of animal training or even raising a child, I guess. Reward the positive behaviors, and you'll then see the positive behavior replicated. Other people will see that positive behavior being rewarded. They want part of that too, so they'll start doing it. And you'll edge towards a more culturally mature place. The other thing is by educating senior management. I've seen an organisation, and there's in fact, Sam mentioned our conference we're having in Australia in September. I've got the chair of that organisation presenting there, but they actually went in a couple of years ago and said, we're about to start this program, and by the way, in a year and a half or 2 years' time, our statistics will look 10 times worse than they are today. Now, that's a really game thing to say as a manager to an executive board. But what he was actually saying is, I'm going to get the organisation reporting, so it's going to look like we're worse. No, what it is you're actually becoming more aware of where we're at. And it's only when you become aware, you can start fixing things. Sure enough, 18 months down track, the statistics were 187% worse. But then management went, oh, we knew that was going to happen. And they now believe in this program because it was predicted. So I'll jump out there. I said it was going to be quick, but over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Ash. Yeah, so again, since Ash is talking about cultures, I would like to talk about the different types of cultures we have around the world as well. So some cultures, again, let's say we talk about developed country, liberal democracy, a lot of freedom of speech. People are used to asking questions. People are used to questioning authority, and authority is actually used to being questioned. In that environment, you can have a very open and honest discussion about bird strike numbers and under the actual state of bird strikes. As we know, in actually a lot of Asian cultures, there is this respect for authority, or maybe even fear of authority. And it's not I speak as an Asian because it's not how some of the Western democracies say, oh, you're autocratic leader, or you're a dictator, or whatever it is. Some people actually like dictators in Asia. So again, I think that the Asian culture is such that sometimes applying that expectation that you can be honest with your numbers, and you can not have to show upward progress or downward trend of strikes. It really does affect some people's careers, and it can end their careers if they keep being too honest. And if the management is not mature enough, what's going to happen is that and people hear from consultants like Master Mark, no, be honest, tell us your true bird strike numbers and all that. And they actually get into trouble because that's not what management wants to see. Management wants to see a downward trend. I don't know how you do it. I don't care how you do it. I want to see a downward trend, and that's it. That's all I want to see. And it's difficult for you to be honest. As the airport manager, as a wildlife manager, you're very tempted to try to, okay, I got to show a downward trend somehow. I got to show less bird strikes this year than last year. And it's very difficult. So again, going back to the culture, I think we need to be self-aware. Again, this is for every single airport manager out there who grapples with this whole scenario of course, in a perfect environment, we can be very honest. Our bosses will understand why strikes went up because of some development or construction that was happening around, and I can explain that away and they will listen to me, that's fine. There are some places where they don't listen to you and they don't want to hear this. All they want to know is how come your numbers are going up. And
Yeah.
again, it can be very difficult. It puts the airport manager in a very difficult place because, um, uh, in a way, I'm very careful when I say this. In a way, you're forced to show a progress because your bonus, like what Ashley said, is resting on that. Or maybe even your next year's employment, your recontract is depending on that. Yeah. So again, of course, I think a lot of us already know that it is important to have clear, accurate information. It's always important for the true information, the information reported to reflect the true actual environment. Otherwise, you're just kidding yourself and you're misleading other people as well. But in some cases, we do probably have to be mindful about the professional cultures out there that may not be so forgiving with you being too honest.
Yep.
Yeah.
Something I'll add on to what you're saying, Chris, is something that you could maybe look into, or if you're an airport, is instead of looking at having your metrics be, let's say, bird strike numbers, you could look at lessening damaging bird strike numbers, or you can look at kind of kind of reworking what you're actually measuring. Would either of you have any recommendations for what those could be besides maybe damaging strikes or something like that?
Ash, you want to answer that?
Absolutely, and mindful of time. That's a really good example, Sam. And what I was going to jump in on the back of what Chris is saying is we talk about training and people on the ground. Hey, there's also a real need for training of those senior management people, for them to understand what this means. But there is a bunch of leading indicators, as there is in any safety management system. And remember, we're just talking has a specific one here. So let's look at the number of people actually trained in your aviation system. So this is operators at the ground level. This is across your ground handlers, your tarmac staff, your airside officers, all of those. How trained and ready are they for that? We talked about equipment before. Let's take a hypothetical. A person on, say, $50,000 a year and a piece of equipment worth $50,000. Well, that person can only work 8, 10, maybe 12 hours a day. What if we, instead of buying that piece of equipment, we now had 2 people at $50,000? We spend exactly the same amount of money, but we can now possibly cover 24-hour ops. So it's changing the mindset of what we're looking at, and a whole bunch of that changes with helping to educate senior management and the boards about this. So there is a bunch of leading things we can look at as well as just those reactionary lagging indicators.
Sure. Okay, it looks like we are right at our hour, so we might go over just a little bit. Apologies on that, but again, feel free to hop off whenever you would like. But we'll still continue for maybe 10 more minutes here. That kind of leads me to my last question that I will ask, which is what makes for an effective wildlife hazard management training program in your eyes? You were just talking about training, so it's perfect.
You're wanting from me, sorry, was it?
Yes, sir.
I think, and again, it's not your keyword that jumps out at me there is effective, which is one I use in my world a lot. It's like, how do you measure effectiveness? So is the effectiveness just a sheer raw number going down? And again, think of our organization that had very low reporting before. It's like, well, suddenly because the reporting's gone up, does that mean it's not effective? You're measuring it in the wrong way. You need to be looking at that balanced, and we used that word before, a balanced mix of leading and lagging indicators, the system participation. If your reporting rates are going up, that's a very effective indication of part of your system. So you've got to think of it in a similar way to, we just don't, me standing on the scales in my bathroom and seeing a number doesn't indicate whether I'm healthy or I'm not healthy. It simply says what weight I am. And even then, it doesn't say why I'm that weight. am I that weight because I've been going to the gym and training to be a bodybuilder, or am I that weight because I've been eating too many nice foods at nighttime? So again, we need to look at the effectiveness of our system in that there's things we can measure, but we've got to understand why we're measuring them and what they are telling us. When you actually have got that balance, that's when you're actually heading towards an effective management system and program.
Sure. Chris, any insights on what makes an effective training program?
Yeah, I think that at least for our industry in airports, uh, an effective wildlife hazard training program really is one where participant goes into the training and comes out with I'll use the phrase mental clarity of what needs to be done moving forward. I think that a lot of airport managers are lost. They've tried everything, and some of them are jaded after 10, 15 years of doing different types of wildlife stuff, whatever they can find on YouTube, whatever they can find on online, and even books and publications. And there are some very good books and publications, thick ones, which really give you the broad what is a good wildlife program. But when they try to go into the specificity of their particular airport or their particular group of airports, they just come to a mental block. And they have all this foundational information, but they don't know how to apply it onto the runway. So I think a good wildlife hazard management, wildlife training program is one where the airport goes in and he has clarity on how he wants to, what he wants to do and how he wants to do it. And people around that room, hopefully from other airports or CAAs as well, have shared, and he is like, aha, okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And I think that any program that can achieve that on the last day of the training has been effective. That would mean that the person is now rejuvenated, armed with new clarity, and they are able to, hopefully, if they are able to get a concept of the framework to be able to deliver that, I think the airport will see very, very good results. Yep.
Yeah, and just stealing with something you said there, Chris, from there as well, and homing in on that word program as well. So I think a truly effective program too is what they call cradle to grave. So it can take into account someone that's new in the organisation through to someone that's been doing it for 20 years. It can take that person that's new and got evolving skills, and it can continuously maintain and develop their skills throughout wherever they go in the organisation, including in advancing their capability, but also advancing if they, for example, go up in management. So it's taking into account how people do that. Yeah, is the refresher training, the training you do each year, is it exactly the same as you did when you first joined the company? If it is, 3 years down track, that person stops listening and you're actually wasting money. Or is it actually maintaining the edge on there? We talked about a knife before, the sharpened skills. Is it maintaining that edge so that they're always at their peak of performance? That's when you actually got a really effective program, I think.
Perfect. Awesome. That actually takes me to my next slide here. And it just a quick note that there are some IKEO wildlife training courses happening actually later this year in November here in Singapore. So we have a wildlife hazard management course and an operations course. The management would be just a little bit more on for managerials, kind of like what Ash was talking about, maybe the higher ups, the ones that are kind of making the plans. And then the operations is going to be a little bit more ground focus. So boots on the ground, what tools, what kind of habitat, all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested, you can absolutely scan that QR code. I know some of our participants have been before, but just keep that in mind before we head to our last section here, which is questions from you guys. So we already have a few. So I'll kind of go with the first question, which is actually from Ziva in Indonesia. Hello, Ziva. His question to you guys is, based on your experience, do regulators or airport operators expect instant results from wildlife hazard management and therefore tend to dismiss the program's importance? Or would they actually invest the time and money for the process to work?
Okay, I'll answer this one first, and I'll keep it short so that Ash can answer as well. I know he's got a response to this as well. I think that they used to 15, 20 years ago, they used to expect very quick results with, especially if they have a particular short time frame. Sometimes they throw a lot of money at you and they expect you to be able to work some kind of miracle. And IKEA as well has changed its tone. I think that they have become FAA, IKEA, EASA. A lot of them have started realizing that bird strike numbers are not bad per se, that bird strike numbers, you want that numbers to be as accurate as possible, so don't suppress that reporting. A lot of Asian countries have started becoming educated in that. I'm heightened to see in the last IKEA meeting in Bangkok that there were a few countries that were really bucking the trend of, okay, let's suppress the numbers, and they're really coming out with the truth. So I think that the awareness among senior management at the ICAO level, at the CAA level, and local CAA level, as well as the airport operator management, have become more aware that this is not a simple problem that can. It's not just throwing money at it, or what. It is a situation that is very complex, and it needs time for it to build its own maturity to be able to yield the results that I haven't seen a single airport that could get all their stuff together in 12 months. I haven't seen that yet. So again, I think that a lot of people are more tolerant. I wouldn't say tolerant. They're more mature in the way they're approaching this. A lot of senior management and CA officials have started realizing that it's not as easy as it is, and started giving timelines that are more realistic. Ash?
Yeah, I think mature is a really excellent word there, and I'd echo what Chris said. Let me talk more from a regulator's point of view. I do see at times, and it's much more isolated now. So the last 10 years or so, there's been a big change. But you do see isolated instances of a particular inspector or maybe in a particular regulator. Oh, you've done this, so where's the results? And I've actually coached some operators when they are coming towards an audit or an inspection on actually how to handle that, because it's part of a high performance teams program, and you actually lay down, these are what this is what we are doing, this is what we're expecting, this is the results we expect to see in the timelines. There's no way as a regulator you can argue against it. And depending on how the regulations are written, in fact, that's Chris mentioned it, exactly how ICAO is going now. Our state safety programs around the world is the classic example. When they first rolled out the state safety program requirements, one of the first requirements is you will have a document within 2.5 years, I think it was. And there was about 2% of the world managed to do it. In the latest version of the Global Aviation Safety Plan, they're actually now talking about the performance things you want to see out of the program and a realistic time frame with it. So they're now changing the shift away from being you need to show me this result, and it's more we want to see that you are doing things towards achieving it. And that actually reflects maturity rather than prescriptive compliance. And there's a much greater change there. So yeah, you do actually see that at times. But I think as long as the investment is in balance, both the tech and the equipment, the program, but also the people, and the people at the grassroots doing the work as well as the management, I think you'll see the regulators around the world, even some of the more autocratic ones, sit there and find it very hard to say anything against it.
Yeah, no, it's a good answer for sure. We have another question. This one's from Vijay. Hello, Vijay, in India. His first question is, what technology has been most effective at your airport in reducing bird wildlife hazards? So maybe is there anything specific that you've seen in your particular airports?
Okay, hi Vijay. Generally, I would say that it really does depend on the airport. It really does depend on what kind of birds you have. And again, you have birds that hang around your runway the whole day. There are birds that come and go only during dawn and dusk. And of course, you have the high flying birds, you have the grass birds. You know, the grass birds, you clap your hand, they fly, they come out of the grass and they go down 5 meters down and they go back into the grass. Versus, say, a heron that you clap your hand and the bird flies 200 meters away. So again, it really does depend on what you're trying to target. If you're trying to target the small birds, then they tend to be more skittish. The bigger birds, you tend to need a bit more oomph to be able to get them to displace themselves and stay out. The small birds tend to get stressed out more easily and all that. So again, I wouldn't want to say one product, there's one thing you can use, but anything that stresses out a small bird and traumatizes them tends to be pretty effective. Again, timing is important. If you catch the bird at the right time, they get freaked out and they fly away. If the bird sees you and then you horn your car horn, the bird is prepared for it. So it's the same bird, it's the same dispersal system, but the timing of it has changed. If you can scare the bird without the bird knowing that you were there, that really freaks the bird out. So again, it's not just the intensity, it's also the timing, it's also the direction, it's also the type of bird you're trying to scare. Again, I'm trying to avoid being very specific in my recommendations because, again, one thing that works for one particular bird may not work for another bird. It's very important for any airport to have a very varied list of tools that you can
Yeah.
use. And I'm talking about 20, 30, 40 different dispersal systems. It can be a flag, it could be a laser, it could be a car horn, it could be you clapping your hands, it could be you waving your vest. It doesn't have to be expensive. Of course, don't take off your vest and wave it, get another vest. Um, and it again, I'm just trying to pull people away from this concept that effective means expensive. You
Yeah.
really can be very innovative with the dispersal techniques that you use. Even if you're a big airport with a lot of resources available, sometimes something as simple as waving a flag is wonderfully effective against certain species of birds. So again, it's just something that you have to look at your airport, try to understand what kind of birds you're trying to scare, what kind of birds you're trying to disperse. Again, I'm talking about dispersal systems in this particular segment. So again, for dispersal system, what kind of bird you're trying to do, and again, the timing of it. You do want to make sure the bird doesn't come back. So the more traumatic it is, I mean, don't traumatize the bird until it dies, but at least, make sure that the bird's not expecting you to do this. Otherwise, it doesn't have that much of an effect.
Same question for Ash. Have you seen anything at different parts of the world that, this technology works here, this works here?
Yeah. And at the risk of sounding like a parrot and repeating things, it's similar to the question we had a little while ago. VJ, if you can give me the privilege of avoiding the word technology again, I've seen the most effective systems at airports where there is a much greater degree of training across all of the people at the airport, not just the airport staff who work airside, but this includes ATC staff, firefighters, ground handling staff, aircraft operators, aircraft maintenance people. Those airports have a much more effective system than one that has, you know, uh, outstanding staff for the wildlife control team and the best technology, but nobody else has training. Why? Because everyone's sharing that mental model. Everyone's understanding that communication, that when the wildlife team reports through to ops and it goes to air traffic about a particular hazard species they've got in a particular location, air traffic control is sharing their understanding of what that actually now means to my air picture and immediately knows, do I need to be telling those inbound aircraft or the aircraft that are taxiing now there could be a delay? That's exactly how air traffic reacts when there's a weather phenomenon, a microburst or a thunderstorm. And we do that every day, but we tend to do wildlife stuff in this very specialist silo, and we pretend that we'll take care of everything, it all goes away, and aircraft fly. So I actually see the more effective systems running around the place where there's a greater degree of training, possibly tailored and changed. So the training that pilots need is completely different than the wildlife control team would need. But they need to also share that mental model, just like we do inside an aircraft crew.
Sure, perfect. I actually have another question from VJ. So it's going to be about training. Which training methods
Yep.
are most effective? Is it going to be classroom learning, field demonstrations, simulations, or e-learning?
Yep. Can I just jump on that one first, and then I'll give it across to Chris? The first one I'd say there, I know there is a quest globally. Let's save on training budgets. Let's save on travel budgets, things like that. There is a place for e-learning. There's definitely a place for it, or virtual classrooms as well. You've got to be really careful with the effectiveness there. If you're basically just trying to get a recognition type awareness training, I think e-learning and that online type stuff has got a place, possibly even to check knowledge, maybe 12 or 18 months down track after someone's received some initial training. By far and away, I find the most effective training where human beings is the way humans interact normally. And it's not even like this where we can see each other on cameras. It's where we can actually talk face to face. Why? Because when this particular module we're doing finishes and we're going to say we're going to take a 10-minute break now to go to a restroom or grab a coffee, on the way out, we start talking and we start going, hey, you said this. Can I ask you about this? I've seen this. It's that human interaction. So I find face-to-face classroom type training by far the most effective. Definitely, depending on what you're looking at, field demonstrations has a huge place as well. There's no point doing training where somebody just puts up pictures of here's a picture of a stock whip, here's a picture of a pyrotechnic. You need to see what that looks like. You need to feel what that looks like. You need to actually understand that if there's a breeze blowing from the east, and I'm using that stock whip, that bird that's on the ground to the east won't even hear the stock whip because the acoustics, it's actually traveled away from you. So the field demonstration, absolutely, when you couple it with classroom training, I think is where you get to nirvana.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of online training, and I think that's why Mastermind itself, we do online training, but we tend to still prefer that face-to-face. Again, for us is that IKEO training in end of the year, and even if we come to visit your country to go and do a mass training for your CAA or your airport group, we tend to see better results from that kind of training activities. A big part of it, of what Ash was mentioning about that human component of it, sometimes you go there with a lot of the people who come for training have already been doing wildlife in the airports for a pretty long time. So it's really you building on that community of people who are around you, being able to have coffee with them, talk with them, and I guess a big part of it is that validation that I'm doing this, you're doing that, and then somebody says, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's wonderful." And it's validating your own efforts from somebody who is also an expert in the same field in a different airport, saying that, "Yeah, that's good," and you start getting motivated by that, and you start saying, okay, maybe I can do it for some other parts of my runway or some of the other airports that I'm also in charge of. That validation, I can't overstate it more. It's so important for you to get encouragement from your fellow peers, in other fellow professionals in other parts of the world doing the same thing that you're doing. Most of the time, from what I've seen, most of the airport managers have a very good program. It's just that maybe it's not yielding the results that they want, and they get a bit disappointed. They need some kind of push, some kind of encouragement to say that you're going on the right track. Maybe have you tried this? Have you tried that? And that's very valuable. Sometimes in online training, you don't quite get that, especially if there are a lot of participants. For the smaller groups of online training, I think that if it were to be an online thing, I think that especially if you really want to take something out of it, smaller groups is very good. Again, if Ash was mentioning, it's actually more of a competency, it's more of a certification thing than a mass training serves. There's a place and time for that as well.
Yep.
Sure. My next question is actually based on what you said a little bit earlier, Chris. It's actually from Vinay. He said, you mentioned using a flag for scaring birds. Is there a particular color that's the most effective when it comes to flags? Very specific question, but yeah, a good
Sam,
question.
I'll let you answer that, Sam.
Okay. I have been using, as wildlife biologists, we go out and we do some of the bird scaring. And from what we've seen, not particularly. What you want to be very clear on is that the tower, they're aware that you're having flags, because sometimes they're going to be looking on the airfield and they see a flag waving and they're going to be like, what's going on? Like, should I stop flights? What's going, so in that aspect, I might say a red flag, maybe no. But what we've been using in Mastermark is kind of a neon yellow greenish flag, and we make sure that it's very large and big. Another thing when it comes to flags
The
is
noise.
you sometimes see, we've seen airports, they take the flag and they wave it on their car for a long period of time. That's actually not how you want to use the flag. You want to keep it hidden until you see a flock of birds, then you take the flag out and you wave it a few times. Because if they get used to seeing that flag, then no point already. So it's just one of those tools that you want to use sparingly so that it still surprises the bird, or maybe not even the bird, the animals. So that's what I would say. Wow, I got a question.
Thanks,
Amazing.
Sam.
Perfect. Okay, well, with that, I think we're already 20 minutes past the hour, so we've definitely overstayed our welcome. But it's been such good conversation. I didn't want to end it, but thank you for the good questions, and thank you, Ash and Chris, for sharing your insights. It's been super insightful. And with that, I say thank you. And hopefully we'll see you either at an IKEO course coming up, or maybe another webinar, or maybe we'll see you at with Ash in Australia, one of them. If not, I believe you all have my email from me emailing you all. So if you have any questions or you think about it tonight or tomorrow, definitely let us know.
You might have one question waiting there with a hand up,
Okay,
Sam.
perfect. Yeah, maybe we can unmute, sure.
Hello, guys.
Yeah, we can hear
I'm
you.
from KTI airport. I want question on August when you come to KTI. The schedule.
Maybe one more time. I think we missed you there.
You're asking us when we're coming to KTI again?
Yes.
Okay, definitely Zen, or was it Max? Sam, who's handling Cambodia?
Both.
Both. Okay, Zen will send you our next trip to your airport. If I'm not wrong, it's within the next 30 days. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Now for the KTI is orange particle is reuse. It's they fly away. No,
Very good.
no less bird. Admin.
Okay. Wonderful. I'll probably call you after this, and then we can talk about Oriental petting calls
Yeah.
at your airport.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks a lot. Sorry for late
Thank you.
coming. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect.
Sam, you're muted.
Thank you, everyone. I think with
Okay,
that, we'll
thank you,
sign off.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Chris.